A new week, a new name vying for your vote for Kansas Attorney General. This one with a lot of practice as a prosecutor. Plus, low turnout and upset races. What the city primaries this week can tell us. But first, to mask or not? What about social distancing? Who should make the call? The confusion surrounding the latest increase in COVID cases. That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. I'm Pilar Pedraza, and this is Kansas Week. We begin today with the ongoing debate over how to battle the latest version of COVID, putting Kansans in the hospital. KSN's Jessica Watson shows us the confusion over just how much of a public health emergency this actually is.
As a business owner whose business was shuttered for 15 months, it's very, very hard for me to enforce a strongly recommended mandate.
It's been less than 2 months since Wave has been able to reopen and have shows again. Jesse Hartke, an operating partner, says another health order is not the solution.
I don't have the financial wherewithal to hire extra staff and to expect the staff that I do have in place to enforce a mandate or a strongly recommended concept.
Wichita Mayor Brandon Whipple says he's not necessarily for a mask mandate, but he did say he's for following medical guidelines. As for face coverings in schools, he says now is the time to encourage masking again.
So this is our window now. If we want our kids in the classroom and we want them to be as safe as possible, as adults, we have to do what it takes to get that spread rate down.
Hartke says since Monday, all employees at Wave are wearing masks again, but she says the only solution is for more people to get vaccinated.
We are lucky enough to live in a country where we have vaccinations available for free for everyone above the age of 12. And it's incredibly frustrating to see that people are not choosing to do what's best for their community and help keep others around them safe who are not able to get vaccinated.
And just as we started recording this episode, new advice from the Sedgwick County Health Officer, Dr. Gerald Minns, on what he believes Sedgwick County residents should be doing. First, if you are not vaccinated, his advice, get vaccinated as soon as possible, presuming, of course, that you are eligible for vaccination. Your doctor has not told you health-wise you can't, and you're 12 years or older. For those who are currently unvaccinated, he also is recommending masking anytime you're in a public space indoors and also outdoors if you can't socially distance from others. If you are already vaccinated, he is still recommending masking indoors if you can't socially distance because those who aren't vaccinated, he says, can be carriers. And here to discuss all of this today and break this all down, we have Diane Leffler with the Wichita Eagle and Dr. Russell Arbin Fox from Friends University, political scientist. Thank you both so much for being here. And Diane, this has been the story of the week, really.
Yeah, I mean, we're headed back to where we started from, and it's not a good thing. I really don't suspect that we're going to see mandates like we once did. I think that probably the time for that has passed, and I think that there's a certain loss of patience on the part of the vaccinated with the unvaccinated, to where they're saying, you know, you guys want to catch COVID, you know, go have at it.
I have definitely heard that one for sure.
But of course, you know, it remains a public health concern as well, because, you know, if the unvaccinated go ahead and contract one of the variants, they become a carrier of that. And that spreads to children under the age of 12, that spreads to people who maybe are vaccinated, but then can carry it and spread it to other unvaccinated people. So, I mean, I can understand why the CDC and our local health officials are talking about the masks. I can understand why Wichita State, like KU and K-State, have made masks a requirement. I can understand why some school districts across the state, in Salina or in Johnson County, have been talking about mask mandates. We're not seeing that locally here, and I agree with Diane that we probably won't see it. Statewide, this is not a fight that Governor Kelly wants to go through again. She's already done that before, and we know how that ends. But yeah, it's just frustrating all around.
And talking about a fight the governor doesn't want to go into, she, of course, a week ago made the ruling that state employees and state buildings would have to mask again, regardless of vaccination status. And then just this week, the Legislative Coordinating Council said, you can't make that ruling in the State House and take the signs down now. So that fight, whether she wanted it or not, is kind of coming back to her.
Oh yeah, and you know, and then you got the court case on the SB 40, and then that was the law that basically stripped the governor of pretty much any power, stripped county health officials like Dr. Minns of their power to do health orders, and so that was overturned by a court, and so now who knows where we are? Who knows who has what authority to do what? Because it's really all up in limbo right now.
Yeah, that appeal headed to the state Supreme Court, which, hey, correct me if I'm wrong, Russell, but is really kind of more a liberal court at this point.
Oh yeah, and they've taken a look at, you know, some of these restrictions before. We can remember from last year when there was controversy regarding the mandate that came out of Topeka and to what degree it really was controlling over churches and, you know, preventing gatherings of, I think it was over 30 people or something along those lines. So the state Supreme Court has waded into these waters before. I'm not sure whatever decision they may make in this case, it's really going to affect people's behavior one way or another. Kelly is not fighting with the legislature over this. She's been able to extend her orders to certain state employees, and I think she's basically hoping for the best, which is where most vaccinated people in Kansas are right now. We know we're not going to go back to the lockdowns. I think we understand on a certain level that a vaccination mandate would probably be the best, but we also know that it's not a politically acceptable option. And so, you know, kind of futzing around with, you know, these different mask recommendations is probably the best we can do.
But we do have some counties that have put in at least mandates for K-6 in schools. Johnson County, Geary County, a couple of others.
True.
Because the kids under 12, they can't vaccinate at this point.
Right. It'll be interesting to see how, you know, like, you know, USD 259, which is, you know, the largest district in the state of Kansas. It'll be interesting to see how it responds, especially once school starts next week and they start taking a look at, you know, the results of bringing so many children together in one place.
And we do know, I'm going to let this be the last moment here, but we do know that Delta variant is hitting kids. Kids are dying from it at a rate we haven't seen before with this pandemic. So definitely more of a concern for the youth right now. All right. Well, it's unlikely the pandemic played much role in the low turnout in this last week's city elections. Just 6% of eligible voters heading to the polls, but they sent back an unexpected result.
Ready to get back out knocking and talking to the voters of District 3 and listen to their needs.
I'm a lifelong South Wichita resident, so I would hope that the people in District 3 realize that and understand that I care.
I've been putting in the work and it shows that it paid off, and I'm just super excited for the next round.
Really build on what the progress that I've made in the first 4 years of my terms.
The top two candidates in the two busiest races for Wichita City Council moving on to the general election. But that's not the headline this year. It's about the top vote getter in each race.
They beat out the incumbents. That's a story. And that becomes part of the dynamic. You know, they're winners and they're going to be able to sell that.
To campaign donors as well as potential voters.
It says something about their ability to organize supporters.
But it's not a guarantee of a political sea change on the council come November.
Those things are going to come right up against the hard realities of winning office. And that means raising a lot of money, contacting a lot of people. It can't just be your friends and supporters.
Which is why political analyst Dr. Russell Arbin Fox says, get ready to hear from all four candidates a lot between now and November, both in person and by proxy. Already, the candidates are starting to discuss their priorities for their districts.
Public safety and streets and repairs and maintenance of streets are really important.
The people of the 3rd District are hurting right now. We have a lot of issues that we need to work on.
Some of the mental health services and our domestic violence numbers are just insane.
South Broadway corridor is riddled with crime and blight. The Hilltop and Plainview neighborhoods also have a lot of problems.
Now, one thing we didn't have time to get into with that particular story is how the specific nature of those two races and the incumbents themselves and what they've done over the last few years, or not done as the case may be, really played into the results as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, the city council's been through a lot in the past year or so.
Yep.
That District 3 race, for example, that's the race to replace James Clendenin, who was basically drummed out of office because of an attack ad and a cover-up against Brandon Whipple. And Brandon Whipple is sort of a little bit of a shadow over this race. These two candidates that did fairly well, you know, that did very well in the primary, they're both backed by him, and they're both also, it's worth noting, backed by the Thompson Army, James Thompson and his supporters. And while James Thompson hasn't been able to get himself elected, he has been instrumental in getting some of the other people who are in office right now into office. So that it's an interesting dynamic. And another thing too is we're talking about funding. Finishing first gives you access to more funding. Even in a race like this where it's just sort of 50-50, I mean, the margins that they won by or that they came in first by were not that significant. But just being at that same level, that tends to bring donors off the sidelines who go, well, I better donate to both candidates just in case, Mm-hmm. So it's that way you're covered if either one of them wins.
Well, talking about the support from Brandon Whipple and the James Thompson Army, that really perhaps having a big impact in the Claycomb Ballard race, because that is more of a liberal community, and Claycomb has turned out to be more of a middle of the road to conservative council person.
Right, and you see this, brought into sharp relief by the arguments that have come up around the non-discrimination ordinance. There's a large LGBTQ population within District 6, and a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them have really gotten fired up with the fairly moderate go-slow approach that Councilmember Claycomb has followed. In regards to the influence of the mayor and kind of the Democratic organization that he's been able to put together, it is especially important to keep in mind that the powers of incumbency are real. Yes, this was a very low turnout election, but nonetheless, one would expect that the incumbent, particularly in District 6, where Councilman Claycomb can say, you voted for me 4 years ago, here are the things I've done for you, you would expect that to carry over. The fact that a couple of challengers beat out the incumbents really has to be attributed to a certain level of organization. And the mayor and his people brought that organization, particularly to people like Mike Hoheisel in District 3, where things got off kind of late there. I mean, Jared Cirillo was just appointed to that seat a few months ago. To have people that are skilled in political operations come and support you, it matters, even in a low turnout election like this.
Yeah. Well, if you were somebody who wanted to vote on Tuesday, and couldn't because you didn't happen to live in District 3 or District 6, that may change because we are moving into redistricting. That means the fight is on over who you'll be able to vote for starting next year. As Kansas Republicans and Democrats get ready to hear your ideas about redistricting, KAKE's John Hayes takes a look at why it's a fight we should all be paying attention to.
It's a map that's looked exactly the same for more than a decade. But as Dr. Neil Allen explains, change is coming.
After we do the census every 10 years, all legislatures and local government entities are required to redraw their voting districts.
That means congressional, legislative, and state Board of Education districts could look a lot different by 2022. The process will be Republican-led in Kansas, and Allen says some upcoming changes could come as a big shock to voters.
Redistricting often determines who your representative is going to be.
That's why the Kansas legislature says it's decided to take part of the process on the road, giving Kansans a chance to weigh in at 14 town halls next week. One stop, Wichita State's Hughes Metroplex. Some Wichita voters say they understand the redistricting process for the most part.
District that you currently are in kind of realign and kind of grow smaller or larger.
They're encouraging others to educate themselves about the potential impact it could have on them.
It's important for the general public to know these things.
Allen argues that while it's great some Kansans will have the opportunity to weigh in, it's hard to overlook what he says is a rushed schedule with poor timing.
If you want to design a citizen input process to get the least citizen input possible, you would design it like the legislature has done it now.
And 14 meetings in 5-6 days, that's a lot. 3 meetings a day for the most part. A lot of complaints that I'm hearing from viewers are that they can't get to the one in their area because they have to be at work. Because if you've got 3 or 4 of them a day, only 1 or 2 of them maybe can be in the evening.
Well, I don't think it's going to matter anyway, frankly. You have public participation, and then you have the illusion of public participation. And in this case, I think we're looking at the illusion of public participation. I covered this process 10 years ago. And it was the most political process, most nakedly political process that I've ever seen. What I suspect is going to happen is they're going to have their 14 meetings. They will take all those comments, put them in a box, move the box off to one side, and then a Republican operative will draw a map that is designed to cement Republican dominance of the Kansas legislature for the next 10 years and probably beyond. And they'll use every technological tool, and the technological tools these days are very good for doing this. So it's just, I don't really see the point to this.
I mean, there's a point, even in the sense that it's kind of a kabuki theater, but it gives people at least the opportunity to say, okay, I was consulted, okay, I participated. But I mean, frankly, I agree with what you're saying, Diane, about it being an illusion. Let's note that local redistricting data hasn't even been released by the Census Department yet. They have promised like sometime in the second week of August, maybe August 12th, maybe August 16th, some of this information will roll out there. The people who go to these meetings, they're not even going to see proposed maps. So the comments that they'll make, it'll be really easy for them to file it away because there's not going to be much substance to any of the comments. I mean, basically what you're likely to hear is, the occasional angry Democrat who's able to make it out to one of these meetings, bringing up Susan Weigel's comment from back in 2020, saying, we know this is what you're going to do and you shouldn't do it. And they'll say, thank you for your input. And then they're going to go ahead and take a look at the strategies for accomplishing exactly that end.
Well, I predict that what's really going to happen here is that some fine day in the legislative session, a map will emerge in the Republican caucus.
Right.
No one will know where it came from. No one will know who put it together. And then that will be voted in. And I just don't think you can overstate the futility of this.
I suspect that the only way that you're not going to see District 3 broken apart is if what happened 10 years ago and some kind of intra-party fight emerges over where is Manhattan going to go, where is Lawrence going to go, and if that happens, it might be kicked to the state Supreme Court again, which is what happened 10 years ago.
Well, it was
and to clarify, by District 3, we're talking about U.S. congressional districts.
Right.
Because we were just talking about city council districts.
Sorry,
I don't want any confusion.
We should have made that distinction clear.
Yeah. But in the grand, it's in the grand scheme of things, we know how this is going to turn out, and
they have a supermajority in the legislature.
Well, yeah, and 10 years ago they had a very vibrant moderate faction that had enough power to block the maps. In fact, that's why they wound up going to the federal court, was that they couldn't get it done.
No.
But that's not going to happen this time.
Okay. Well, we know one race that won't be affected by redistricting because it covers the entire state, so all of us will be voting in it, and it won't come before voters until next year. But we already have 3 candidates now for the office of Attorney General. Tony Mattivi, a retired assistant U.S. attorney, becoming the latest to throw his hat into the ring. The Associated Press reports that Tony Mattivi launched his campaign for Attorney General by announcing Sedgwick County DA Mark Bennett will be his campaign treasurer. Mattivi is best known for his work prosecuting the man accused of orchestrating the bombing of the USS Cole in Yemen. He also tried the case against 3 Garden City men now convicted of plotting to bomb Somali immigrants there. Mattivi joins former Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach and Kansas Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Kelly Warren in seeking the Republican nomination for Kansas Attorney General. Derek Schmidt is vacating the seat as he seeks the governor's office. And Mattivi has already gotten a few endorsements from large groups, especially in law enforcement. What does his entrance into this race do to this race? Russell?
Well, okay, so Chris Kobach is a known quantity. We know that there are people who passionately support him. We also know that the majority of the Kansas state Republican establishment doesn't want him to get the nomination. So the question is, how are you going to make certain that by the time the primaries roll around next year, that the right Republican gets the nomination? I take a look at these 2 other candidates, and the question that occurs to me is basically, which one is going to position themselves as the moderate not Kobach, and which one is going to position themselves as the conservative not Kobach? Because you know that there are actually still a few moderate Republicans out there. You might be able to leverage them to win a Republican nomination battle in the primary. But then there's also conservatives out there who don't think that Kobach can win in the general. So I'm going to be interested to see, as the campaign rolls forward, how are they going to kind of triangulate against Kobach and appeal to the different factions within the Republican Party?
Well, I've studied this race, and I've covered this race, and there doesn't seem to be any policy daylight between these 3 candidates, at least at this point in the race. I think if you're looking for a moderate, you might need to look someplace else.
But it'll be a matter of the way they present themselves, so that Republican voters can think to themselves, oh, I'm not voting for Kobach, I'm voting for another conservative, or I'm voting for someone who's maybe not as conservative. But you're right, policy-wise, when it comes to the Attorney General race, there's not a whole lot of breadth there.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Mattivi, at his campaign announcement, his main theme was to sue the Biden administration every chance he gets. So it's not.
And that was very similar to what Chris Kobach was saying at his announcement.
Yes.
Well, and it's Derek Schmidt has been saying the exact same thing in office. So maybe nobody sees any opportunity when it comes to winning a primary for being anything other than, a copy of Chris Kobach.
And then you look at the name recognition factor. Everybody knows the name Chris Kobach.
Nationwide.
Yeah, and nobody, nobody.
But the state Republican Party establishment still won't want him to win, because they've looked at his track record and they know that as intense the support is for him, the opposition to him is pretty intense as well.
Yeah.
Well, we're not done talking about this race because we're still a year away from the primary. We will be back on that. Right. We've got one more thing to talk about, though, today. Wichita police working with federal partners to investigate a potential hate crime. I spoke with a couple who told me they were attacked for their sexuality last month.
Whatever reason, they decided that we weren't worthy of respect of just being able to be ourselves.
Nolan Nez says he and his fiancee Cameron Berger were walking home from a bar in July when several people attacked them near Central and Emporia, shouting slurs about their homosexuality.
All of a sudden I hear something to the effect of, "What are you doing?" or something like that.
At one point, they say, a car even hit Cameron, knocking him to the ground. Both of them ended up going to the emergency room.
But I do have quite a few different scars and scratches from where I was dragged and hit. I have like one on my forehead from it now.
Nolan had a severe cut to his head that later got reinfected, sending him back to the ER. A month later, they're both still shaken by what happened.
I started to have a panic attack, and I was like, I can't be here. I don't like being around people. I had a panic attack before I went to the eye doctor.
Nolan shared pictures of the injuries he and Cameron suffered on his Facebook page, and they're now sharing their story with us because they feel the atmosphere is getting more hostile in Wichita against the LGBTQ plus community, especially during the recent debates about a non-discrimination order in the city council.
We're people with lives. I have a fiance, we're gonna get married. I have a dog and a cat. Like, we're people. Please treat us like people. My hope is that we can start a conversation about making sure that people that dehumanize other people understand that their language and their actions hurt real people.
Wichita police now working with federal investigators, treating the attack as a hate crime.
I appreciate that it's being taken seriously and that it's being considered that, because in the end, that is what happened.
At one point, both Nolan and Cameron made to me was how much they really feel that debate over the non-discrimination ordinance in the Wichita City Council impacted how people treat them.
Yeah, I mean, you can't have that discussion in a town without bringing out an element. And it's unfortunate. It is cowardly, frankly, for people to do to these two men what they did to them. And I found over the years that bullies are they're very courageous in a group, and it's just, I mean, that we're even having this discussion in 2021 year of grace is just beyond the pale.
No.
You know, the actions of some people on the city council, you know, in regards to their desire to bring more voices in and go slow, you can't necessarily connect that with, you know, a hate crime like this or an accused hate crime like this. At the same time, though, you can't help but think about the statement made by Councilmember Brandon Johnson, where he said there are some people that are not going to change their minds. This is something we need to go forward with, recognizing that we're just not going to get the kind of unity that some people imagine we'll be able to achieve. In terms of this crime, I mean, do you know anything about what the police have been doing for the last month? I mean, this was something that happened to them in July.
They have been what I know is they've been investigating. Part of why the couple is speaking out now is because they are hoping that more people will pay attention and maybe somebody saw or heard something that would help them connect the last few dots they need to. And we're going to have to leave it there. We are out of time. Dion, Russell, thank you so much for joining me. I'd also like to thank our news partners at Cake News, the Wichita Eagle, and KSN News for sharing their materials with us. We'd love to hear what you think or your ideas for future topics. Just email us at kansasweek@kpts.org. For now, stay safe and have a great week.